welcome back to my channel. Thanks so much for joining me today, and thank you so much for all of your support over the past several months, over the past couple of years. If you've been following me on TikTok, I really appreciate it. I know here on YouTube I kind of posted some videos and then took a very long break, but there's a lot of reasons for that, and now I hope to start making more regular content, hopefully posting once to twice a week. So make sure you do subscribe, make sure you ring the notification bell, that way when I do post new content you will be the first to know. For those of you who don't know, my name is Christy, and my channel specifically exists to help people who are questioning their faith or deconstructing from their faith, to explore alternative perspectives, to find confidence and validation in their new faithless journey, and perhaps find language to use when responding to people who are questioning why you've left the church or why you've lost your faith. Christian deconstruction isn't about destroying everything. I think a lot of theists hear Christian deconstruction and they think that it means something really bad, when really it's all about each individual's personal journey. If you are deconstructing from Christianity, what you're doing is you're taking the bigger picture and you're kind of picking apart all of the little pieces to kind of examine them further and see if what you believe still holds true when you closely examine and scrutinize what you believe. There are so many concepts within this kind of Christian framework, the Christian doctrine, that if you just kind of pick apart and examine a little bit further, it doesn't really make sense. And one of those concepts that I want to talk about today is justice, specifically divine justice. Now, when I was a Christian, I believed in the typical evangelical concept of God, that God was a God of love and grace and mercy and compassion, but he was also a just God. He was a God that loves and demands justice. He hates sin, he hates evil, so he demands that justice be served to those that commit evil, that do bad things. And this is how I justified eternal punishment for sins when I was a Christian, because it's very difficult to pair a God who loves all people and wants people to be saved with a God who also tortures people or sends people to hell for even petty crimes. And when I was a Christian and I were witnessing to someone and someone questioned me about why a loving God would send someone to hell, I would respond with, because God is just. He's perfectly just. He can't just let sin go unpunished. In the same way, a good judge can't just let a criminal walk free, God's not going to let sinners walk free. He can't allow sinners into heaven, because he is perfect, he is holy, heaven is a holy place, and so it has no room for sin or evil, and so that sin and evil must be extinguished, it must be punished. And then I'd say, but that's why we have Jesus, because Jesus acted as a sacrifice for that sin. Jesus took the sin, the punishment onto himself so that justice could be served, but grace could be enacted if you just accept his gift of salvation. You just have to believe in him and then you will be saved. And so therefore justice has been served and grace has also been served, and so the two can simultaneously coexist. Isn't that great? On the surface it sounds like it makes sense. On the surface it sounds beautiful, inspiring, poetic even. God designed a system where both justice and grace could be enacted, and even the worst of people could have a chance to be redeemed, to be saved. But how are we defining justice? What does perfect justice mean? And can justice and grace actually coexist? These questions are crucial starting points when deconstructing this idea of divine justice. I don't think it's going to take very long for us to examine it and break it down. But it is not up for me to decide where you land on this. It is not up for me to decide where you stand on, justice and grace. I just want to provide an alternative perspective and encourage you to ask the right questions when you are deconstructing this concept. So let's talk about justice. The dictionary defines justice as either getting what you deserve or the quality of being fair and reasonable. And I think those two go hand in hand. Now let's look at the definition of grace. Grace is the free and unmerited gift of God that is manifested in the salvation of sinners. So the word unmerited means undeserved. You don't deserve what you're getting more than you deserve. Justice is getting what you deserve, not getting more, but getting what you deserve for your actions. If you are being treated according to how you deserve to be treated, then you're not being treated in a way that is more deserving than you deserve to be treated. Those are two very different concepts. So right off the bat, grace and justice cannot coexist, at least not in like the simplest form. They're like oil and water. They just cannot combine. Now, a Christian will say that God created the perfect plan so that they could coexist. So let's examine that. Let's see if God's plan allows for grace and justice to both coexist. And we can do this by using the very analogy that is often used within Christian apologetics to describe this concept of justice and grace. Christians will say, you're on trial for murder. You know, you've done something very bad, and you're in the courtroom and you're about to be sentenced to life just like you deserve. But somebody, Jesus, walks into the courtroom and he says, I'll take his punishment. I'll take her punishment. Don't send them to prison. Send me to prison instead. Let them walk free. And now justice has been served. You know, there is somebody that's paying for the crime, and grace has been enacted because you get to walk free. And when I tell you that this used to be so convincing for me, and this is how I used to explain the message of salvation to people, and in my head I was like, yeah, that makes sense. But hold up. If the killer, the person who actually committed the crime, is not being sentenced and not being punished, but someone who is innocent and has never committed a crime is being sent to prison, where is the justice in that? Justice has not been enacted. Jesus isn't getting what he deserves. The criminal isn't getting what he deserves either. Nobody's getting what they deserve. There is no justice in this scenario. There might be grace, but justice has not been served. So in this scenario, even that Christians will provide to prove this point, we're not seeing this compatibility of justice and grace. We're not seeing both be served at the same time. They're claiming justice is served, but just because you say justice has been served and an innocent serving prison time for a crime they didn't commit doesn't mean that that's actually justice. So knowing this, now when they say that the reason people are punished for their sins, the reason people go to hell, is because justice must be served, and God is perfect in his justice, now we can respond to that and say, well, wait a minute, there's no justice being served there. And especially if people are indeed going and suffering eternally for something they did in a finite universe, then we're still not serving justice because they're not getting what they deserve. You don't deserve to be eternally tortured for something you did in a finite universe. Maybe you should be punished for what you did here on earth. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of punishment. I much prefer rehabilitation, but that's for a different episode. But nobody's getting what they deserve when they're being eternally punished for petty crimes here on earth. Because Christians will say you can be the nicest person on the planet. You can do every good deed in the world. You can live your life in love and servitude and compassion for others. But if you don't have Jesus, you're going to hell. You're going to pay for your sins. And you're going to pay the same way a mass murderer would pay, because you're both going to hell if you don't accept Jesus. And actually, if that mass murderer decides to accept Jesus at the end of their life, they're going to heaven. Nobody's getting what they deserve in this scenario. I don't see the justice of it all. And so if there is no justice in it, well, then the entire argument falls apart. So I would just encourage you, if you are being taught this ideology, and you're being told that God is perfect in his justice, this is why he sends people to hell, and you know, that you can be saved if you just accept his gift of grace. And by the way, accepting his gift of grace is just believing in him. It's just believing. That's it. It doesn't seem like the right measure for determining if somebody deserves grace or not. And that's such a funny sentence now that I say it, like, deserves grace. Grace is unmerited. Grace is undeserved. People are only being chosen based on the fact that they believe it to be true. It's not like a fairy. It's not like you have to believe in fairies in order for fairies to exist. And so I know I just kind of went off there, but back to what I was saying. If you are being taught this, I encourage you to question it. I encourage you to pick it apart, to ask the questions that pop in when this is being presented to you. Does this make sense? Is this really justice? Can justice and grace coexist? Is anybody getting what they deserve? And I can't answer it for you, but I am answering it for me. And for me, none of it is compatible with what I would describe as perfect justice. So I hope I gave you some food for thought. I hope I gave you something to think about, and perhaps some language to use when you're getting in conversations with your religious family members, or, former community members who are questioning you on all of this. It's always good to have the confidence and the language to respond, because so often when you've been indoctrinated, it is very difficult to sort through these things. Even if you find something that is very nonsensical or unbelievable, it can be very difficult to know how to pick it apart and how to kind of reconstruct your own view on the situation apart from the indoctrinated view. When you have a belief that has been drilled into your mind, it can be very difficult to separate yourself from that. So give yourself patience and compassion. Give yourself time to work it all out, to think about it, to write about it, to talk about it. But also understand that you owe nobody an explanation for why you don't believe. You are not obligated to explain why you left, why you don't want to be a part of a religion. Your journey is yours, and it is valid no matter what anybody else says. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember to subscribe. Please remember to hit the bell, and please go follow me on TikTok if you aren't already, at Christy.Burke.